Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Eastern Shore Talk, your podcast for all things self care and movies. We are on episode 22, and if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We're glad to have you. And as usual, I'm Jay Watson,
And I'm Liza Ledford.
and Liza is joining me this evening, and we're going to get into all things movie sequels. It's a pretty big movie topic. It kind of encompasses so much because there seems to be so many franchises and multiples in the movie world. So we're going to kind of dive into all things movie sequels. But we want to do a little bit of check-in before we get on to the movie sequels. So, Liza, what's going on? What's coming up with the OCC and the CFF?
Yeah, so the Oxford Community Center has been really busy. We were blessed by having the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra last weekend, and they came down and played a chamber concert for us, and that was really a nice gift. And then we have the Chet Avon Players are coming in with Hallelujah Girls for some theater, which is always good for any mental health. It's good for laughter. It's good
Oh
for
yeah,
community. And then we get into some music. We've got the hubcaps coming at the end of August for Labor Day weekend. And some Dancing with the Stars. We're doing a project with the Chesapeake Multi Resource Center, the Multicultural Resource group, Chessmark. And we are doing a dance-a-thon with them and
okay,
having a whole dance off, which will be super fun, September 21st, and then a run walk for mental health with the whole coalition and the Christopher Bradley Foundation. There's just so much. So you'd go to the oxfordcc.org and you would check out all the different things because there's just something different for everybody. There's just reasons to connect. And then the Chesapeake Film Festival, we have a special screening, the Andrew Wyeth, the Wyeth film, and his granddaughter will be there to talk as well. There is a waiting list for that, but you would go to chesapeakefilmfestival.com. And then the actual festival is September 27 to 29. So you would go to that website and get your tickets and enjoy that weekend.
awesome. So yeah, so I guess it's safe to talk about something else that'll be coming up at the OCC in the very near future. Is going to be the Eastern Shore Talk podcast. Is going to be doing our first live episode filmed live in front of a live studio and live to social media at the same time. So as details become ironed out, we'll let everybody know what's going on with that. I know Liza, I speak for Kathy when I say we could not be more thankful for you guys at the OCC giving us an opportunity to do this, and we look forward to the partnership and hope it's a good experience for everyone.
Absolutely. It's a good chance for us to use all of our technology and have you taping and streaming and everything from the red curtain, we call it, from the stage at OCC. It'd be really
Gotcha.
nice.
Awesome. So yeah, so tonight we're going to dive into movie sequels, all things movie sequels, and like we were talking earlier before we came on, and it was kind of you would think that the topic of movie sequels would be an easy one to kind of talk about, but there are so many sequels, either big franchises that have multiple movies, or just a litany of movies that have had part one and part two, or what have you. That it's kind of hard to narrow down um, some memorable sequels. So, what are your thoughts on some sequels that maybe have stood out to you?
I think, going back to some of the classics, you have like The Godfather. And I think The Godfather, most people would say number two was the most favorite of everybody's. Um, I think it's just fun to watch those characters have an evolution and see what happens next and set up the next generation, like a generational pull on that whole environment and world that they built so well. So there's always that one. And then more modern, I would say, Top Gun is a good example of really bringing in a new generation to
Yep,
just an exciting career, an exciting world, just a lot of good buddy film, a good romance. I mean, all the classic favorite things in the movies. They did such a good job at that.
absolutely.
I
So
remember
it's
you saying you
interesting.
kind of liked it.
It's my favorite sequel of all time, and it's not even close. And I went into the theater thinking that I was going to enjoy it because I enjoyed the first one, but it's one of the very few movies that I actually went back to the theater multiple times to watch.
Yeah.
And part of that was to just watch the crowd response to what was going on the screen.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, you like you said, you feel every emotion. You're on a roller coaster. There's action and there's
Yeah.
romance and then there's sadness and every emotion you feel it. It was kind of the big screen version of Ted Lasso in that you feel it all the whole time. It's my number one.
Yeah.
But getting back to what you were talking about with The Godfather, here's what's interesting about The Godfather with me. I had never watched any of The Godfathers all the way through until maybe 5 years ago. I
Mm.
would I would have them on, kind of check in if they were on TV, and I'd catch bits and pieces. But I had never watched the original Godfather all the way through until maybe 5 years ago. And when I finished watching it, of course, it's one of the, you know, like you said, one of the most universally well liked, award winning movies that there's ever been. And I didn't dislike it, but I was just like, I don't think I was as blown away as a lot of people. And I so that part two was kind of just like okay to me because I wasn't so attached to part one as a lot of people. Um, and maybe that was a preconception on my part because I was so late to watching the first one that I kind of had maybe some of the intrigue and some of the impact was kind of diluted because it had been talked about so much that it
Right.
wasn't a new experience for me. I don't know. And again, I didn't dislike it by any means. I'm not, it was just, it was a good movie for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but it just kind of didn't sit with me like it did with most people. Maybe that was just because I was just so late to getting to see it to begin with. Because
Yeah.
what was it made in the 70s?
I think it was the 60s.
Maybe,
I
yeah.
don't know.
So yeah,
I don't remember. But I
so
remember a lot of since the first ones and even that second one, there were so many genre movies at that time. You may have seen so many like Mafia and that kind of family wasn't
yeah,
new anymore. And we'd seen it in different environments and you'd seen, Scarface had probably come around by then and things. So other opportunities to have seen like that kind of character,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Like I said, it was probably diluted. It was not as impactful because I'd either heard about that movie specifically or whether it was Goodfellas or Casino or
Yeah, exactly.
that
Those
yeah.
are great.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but of course I just talked about Top Gun Maverick, and I'll
Mhm.
tell you another one, and it's pretty new that it really, and I enjoyed the first one, but Inside Out 2,
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And I liked the first one for sure, but this one,
Mhm.
I just love this one. Maybe I'm a little partial because when I saw the previews for this and Disney Pixar had put out the previews and said that anxiety was going to be introduced as one of the new emotions,
Right.
I was hooked right then, and they just did
Mhm.
such a wonderful job of representing what anxiety can be
Yeah.
in a way that both kids and adults would get something out of watching that both.
Yeah.
So
That's a
yeah,
smart use of the movies. I mean, that film is just so smart and helpful in many ways.
that's kind of the double whammy of having a good entertaining movie, but also have some meaning and have a story to tell and an important message to talk about. And
Yeah.
it just hit all the buttons at the same time. And I like to say, Liza, that if I either feel, learn, or um, what's the third one? If I feel something from a movie, if I learn something, or it makes me reflect on my own life, if it does one of those three
Mhm.
things, that's a successful movie going experience for me.
Yep.
That one kind of hit all three.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, I know you saw, I think you said you saw recently that the silent what the origin of the silent movies or whatever that one is, you know what I mean? They had to be
uh,
totally quiet. The Quiet Place.
oh yes, 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 yes. John Krasinski. Yes,
Yeah.
that
Did
was
you
a
saw the recent one?
yes, and I liked it. That was a prequel.
Right.
They kind of tell you where those creatures the day they first came.
So
So
it's
it,
interesting that you just defined the prequel from the sequel, because obviously they made the sequel, but as a prequel.
yeah,
So
well,
how does that
chronologically, it was a prequel. Yes,
right?
release wise, it was a sequel.
Right. And it's
Yes.
for me coming from the business world of that a little bit is how like why did they decide that was the story? You know, is that there was no other story in the moving forward from the story they wanted to go back and then I saw it and I didn't feel like it really explained still where those things came from or it didn't really do what I was expecting it to do.
No, there are certainly, yeah, it doesn't say why or where they came from. It just it kind of takes you back to the point in time where they arrive.
Right.
And, but I will say, just for me, having seen the first one, the original of the two, um, I don't know that there was anything to tell chronologically farther down the line. I don't, I just,
Hmm.
because that was, I did not expect to like that as much because to have a movie where there's no dialogue,
Right.
that's tough.
Have
That
you
was
seen have you seen the TikToks about their cat? Like if your cat would survive?
uh-uh.
Oh, it's really quite entertaining. There's a whole like trending thing where you're holding your cat and you're running across the camera and you're seeing if your cat's going to be loud or quiet
Right.
because that cat is kind of one of the stars of that, prequel, sequel and it's just funny because it's like one of the only things that really I found sort of memorable about that show, at all. But I don't know. So you don't mind when they even in the Star Wars, franchises when they go out of sequence and they go into back to the beginning and they reinvent stuff. So how do you feel about that?
I think it's hit or miss, and I think for me it's a case by case basis.
Hmm.
Um, I liked I liked the whole Star Wars franchise. I did love it.
Hmm.
Kathy's a huge Star Wars fan. I'm more a Star Trek fan than a
Okay.
Star Wars fan. Um, so I was okay with it. The only thing I didn't like was when they went backwards chronologically, but yet um, the movies had advanced, technology had advanced cinematically. Visually, it looked futuristic, but it was actually chronologically a prequel. So
That's true.
it was kind of wonky to me
Yeah.
that way.
Got
Um, but I think with A Quiet Place, to me, it made more sense to go backwards. But I do agree that it would have been nice if they had taken a little bit to, even if they had just written it on the screen at such a day. Not shown it, but just
Hmm.
let us read something about what happened for these creatures to come to Earth.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because, first of all, I think John Krasinski and his writing partner did such an amazing job to be able to convey emotion in the original without a word being spoken.
Yeah. That's
That's that's amazing to do that. And it was so Emily Blunt, John
hmm
Krasinski, and the other actors had to be so body language oriented with it, whether it was sign
hmm
language or just facial expressions. So,
yeah.
but for them to go backwards and it's probably maybe the first 30 minutes, 45 minutes, they're talking just like because nothing's happened yet. So
Right.
to watch them have to realize and learn that these creatures are sound driven, that
That's
that
true.
was that part of it where they figured that out and to you know to watch these characters go from being social as humans are to
Right.
literally overnight not being able to say a word to each other and watch their characters have to adapt to that in real time in the movie
Yeah.
was really cool. And
That's true.
Lupita Nyong'o is such a wonderful actress, so she was
Yep.
really good.
I liked the interpersonal. It really takes it to the interpersonal level. Like you had to connect on a human level of, you know, just being yourself and letting a stranger, you know, into your world and into your heart.
Yes,
And that's the whole point.
and later on in the movie, she befriends this other guy, and they have some very poignant, like very personal moments that are happen
Yep.
between these two actors without a single word, and
Yep.
just with whether it's just holding a hand, or just all these little
Yeah.
things.
That's
Um,
what I mean, that human contact between those
yes,
two, that they made that friendship out of nowhere. To me, that was the whole movie, was watching that friendship evolve and having him fulfill, you know, basically let her fulfill her house. I don't know, that was just a beautiful ending, and their surprise and
and
how
it
she,
and they came at it from two different directions because she was struggling with her health issues.
right.
So she had kind of is not a social person at all. She's kind of isolates in this place that she's living, and you can tell when this whole thing goes down. He's the kind of person that is extremely dependent on human contact.
Hmm.
They come at the whole situation from opposite ends socially, and to kind of
Totally.
find middle ground,
Yep.
and to have these very personal and poignant moments that have this, not just a hey, we need each other to survive, but like a real genuine friendship without having said a word to each other.
Yeah.
um, Again, I mean, just yeah, that's yeah, that's pretty impressive.
And it's a good example for us all to learn how to let our guards down a little bit, how to let those unsuspecting friendships into our lives.
Yeah.
It's hard to do. We get so much easier to be closed off than letting that stuff evolve.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir, Liza, and I know we've all talked to it a bunch of times. I was that. I was the
Hmm.
extreme of that. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Totally. What else we've got? What are some other ones you like? I mean, I have a couple other fun examples we could talk about. There's when I went to see Logan, the new Deadpool, I just saw the other night, and I know
that's on
you've
my
seen it
list.
too.
Yep, yep.
Okay, good. And so you liked it or
I
not?
did. I really liked it. It's the best of the three Deadpool movies so far.
Yeah.
I tell you, as we've you and I and Kathy have talked about music in movies,
Mm-hmm.
I've discovered that, and maybe they do this intentionally. You could tell me about this.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a musical moment early on that kind of hooks you, like, oh, what's going to be the next musical thing they're going to do for me and Beasing them, and they did
Yeah.
that with the Bye 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 with NSYNC at the very beginning.
Oh yeah, that was so good. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, when's the next music coming? So I'm like, I mean, I like Deadpool anyway because he's
Mm-hmm.
as a superhero, he's so like it's light. It's kind of like very raw humor, very kind of
Mm-hmm.
it's very sarcastic and out there and in your face, and
Yeah.
it fits Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman's personality, and they're apparently good friends in real life, like really
Right.
close in real life.
Yeah.
So those two are just gold. But I liked it a lot, like a lot. I
I
just
did too.
it's there's a lot of gore and blood and you know superheroes killing superheroes, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's really like not even primary to the movie to me.
Yeah, and none of them really ever die. So it was so funny because you're like, oh, how about the one when they're fighting in the car? Like they're just they've there's no die. So they're just so funny to watch the fight scenes as just an exercise in a cool filmatic,
Yeah,
fight scene when there's nothing at stake in terms of like actually the fear of losing someone you
yeah.
care about. You're just like, this is just fun.
There's no
And
winner or loser.
yeah.
It's just an action.
Exactly. And that was like almost kind of all the way through with that. So it took away a lot of that part by adding in again sort of the humanity part of it and the friendships and the funny comedy. And he gets away with so much with his comedy,
And the
So
fourth wall, they break the fourth wall down, and he talks about some real life stuff about Fox being bought by Disney and all
yeah,
these things.
that was great. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
he throws all kind, and he calls himself Marvel Jesus because after Endgame, Marvel's kind of gone to pot in a lot of ways, and he's like, he's kind of acknowledging that okay, Deadpool's going to bring Marvel back, and
Right. I love it. I love it. And then for the end, like the moral is like he gets to save people because he's not trying to save them, but they needed him versus him needing them. Like that,
yes,
all that is again true in life. The more you give, the more you actually get in
yep.
terms of relationships and all of it. So that was super fun to watch. I
And
love
I really like the other kind of smaller roles that the other superhero. And I don't want to give it
Oh my
away
god.
too much.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
cameos are all so
they're
good.
all over the place. And there's actually, and you have to really be paying attention, or after the fact, I like to go back and with the hundreds of Deadpools that show up in one particular part of the movie,
Yeah.
there are voiceovers of all these different actors and actresses that pop in as voices.
Oh,
That
how
if you're
funny.
not really paying attention, you can't really, because they may only have one line, so it's hard to pick up. But
Oh,
there
that's
there are
funny.
several famous actors and actresses that did the voiceover for one of those versions of Deadpool in that one scene that
Oh
we
my gosh. I'm gonna have to go listen now. Heightened sensitivities.
including Blake Lively.
Oh yes, yes.
That's a pretty easy one and obvious, but yes.
Yeah, they
Um,
were so fun, and in all the ones like in that other world just made me laugh so hard, and they're so
yeah,
good. It was really fun.
and I like the connection with Loki. That was
Yep.
and with the multiverse, you can do that.
Yes.
And it reminded me that scene where with all the Deadpool's reminded me of the scene when when Loki is thrown out of the TVA and he finds all the other versions of Loki. It's
Yes.
yeah, it's just like that. So yeah,
That is so good. I do. I love that.
I
It
would
was
have
so
not
clever.
have I would not have thought of those two specific movies crossing over initially, but if you really think about it, the TVA is all about trying to maintain the proper timeline. So
Yeah,
it makes all the sense in the world in the
exactly.
Marvel multiverse. Yeah, so I
Yeah,
really liked it a lot.
I did too. I really like that.
To leave us a quote unquote superhero movie smiling because you just had such a good time.
Hmm.
It's that's what sets it apart because like with the Avengers thing, you were on an emotional ride because they had such a bad guy to overcome, and they all had to come together, and then they were
Yeah.
all half of them were blipped out, then they have to come back, and so there was that suspenseful part of that, which is more typical of what a superhero movie would be.
Yeah.
Deadpool throws all that out the window and just says, "Nope, we're going to present a superhero in a way that you're not even going to expect, and you're going to have
Definitely.
a ball watching it." And I did.
Yes, I agree completely. And again, the music was so fun, like Madonna, and I mean, some of the way and when they use certain pop songs, they've just revived them. Like,
Yep.
I love that.
It
That was
adds
really
to the
fun.
emotion of the scene, and
Yeah.
when they do it so early on, and I'm starting to see this as a little movie trickery where they throw that really cool. They did this with the most recent Godzilla and Kong movie, which is another one
I
on my list,
I did watch that. I love that one
where
too.
when they're getting ready to go under into the other world, and I forget the name of the song, but it was only they didn't play the lyrics, just the music. But anyway, they're in their spaceship and they're and that was early on in the movie, and I'm like, oh,
Yes.
I'm yeah,
They did
I'm
great music in that.
yes.
Hmm.
Um, and another one for me, and this is a huge franchise, and they've had 10, but the most recent Fast and Furious, which was called Fast X,
Oh yes,
which was the
yes.
10th one. Um, it was fantastic, and I've liked them all, but they've all kind of been, I've had varying degrees of enjoyment from different ones.
Hmm.
Uh, the first one that The Rock showed up in, I think that was 6 or 7.
Okay.
I like that. That one stood out to me, and the original one was good. I
Yeah.
did not like Tokyo Drift. It was the worst. It was terrible because
Yeah.
none of the cast was in that one.
Right. I
Um,
didn't see that one.
but ironically, they bring back some of that cast from Tokyo Drift into number 10 as kind of
Interesting.
a, and they kind of make fun of it, like knowing that that was a bad one. Then they kind of tongue in
That's
cheek
funny.
say, "Yeah," they kind of go with it. And it was actually Fast X Part One. There's either 2 or 3 parts to this is the final like chapter or chapters of the Fast and Furious, but
Gotcha.
it was the best by far. Brie Larson shows up as a new character.
Okay.
Um, yeah, just a great cast. Charlize Theron shows up again. She's been in the last
Oh
couple.
yeah. I love
She
her.
shows up again. Um, she's got such a great character too, but it very obviously. ends in a cliffhanger where you're like, okay, but we all kind of knew in advance. I want to say they said there was 3 parts to the final chapter.
Okay.
So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. That one was the best, easily, of all that franchise.
That's so interesting. And you think those franchises are making it this long? Because what repeats the most? If the characters aren't always consistently repeating, is it just the scenarios and like the heightened excitement and the challenge is sort of like evergreen in terms of that? You just want to be in that environment and feel that energy.
Well, I think with the Fast and Furious, they had gone several with basically the same cast. Like I said, when they introduced The Rock, and The Rock being such a gigantic star, I think that kind of they were kind of like branching off or expanding, and
Mm-hmm.
that opens up so many more storylines.
Yeah.
And Jason Statham kind of joined as the bad guy, and then he's kind of come back as the good guy later on. And Charlize Theron being introduced as the bad guy a couple movies ago. Um, but yeah, it's introducing these. They've kind of expanded, and they've all done so well. They're not like Marvel level, box office, but they do well enough to obviously put another one on. But oh,
Mhm.
and the latest one, Jason Momoa plays the bad guy, and he's fantastic.
Oh, right. Okay.
When was the last time we ever saw Jason Momoa as a villain?
Yeah.
He plays Aquaman, and
Right.
he played he played a good guy sort of on Game of Thrones. It kind of depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
He did some bad stuff, but they all did.
Yeah. That's their world.
But he plays this really eccentric, like really out there, like flamboyant. Um, it's way different than anything he's ever done. He's fantastic as the villain. Um, he's very unlikable, not just from his actions, but just his personality. He's very arrogant, just out there, and just doesn't seem to care. And it was
Mhm.
that casting was not only was the casting great, but just he takes the movie. He is the performance of the movie as the
Yeah,
villain for sure.
that is
Um,
fun.
yeah,
I was thinking of some sequels that I liked, and I realized the reason I liked that particular sequel was that the woman was a really huge part of it. You know, taking Linda Hamilton in
yes,
Terminator 2. Like,
yeah.
I loved her in that. I was watching that for her. And maybe it was just because I'm a woman and that was my entry point into the characters and into the story, but I liked it so much more than the first one. I don't know why. And I think she just added so much to it. But that's true for me also with the Alien
Sigourney
series.
Weaver, yeah.
Yes, they're such strong women and they're so fun to watch. And I don't know, I just think sometimes that really works.
And the newest one of the aliens is about to be released called Romulus.
When I saw that as a teaser for the Deadpool movie, I just was like, I
Yeah,
cannot wait. It looks so good. It's
yeah.
just so scary, but like, just it'll be at the edge of your seat the whole entire time. It looks like.
Now, did Ridley Scott do all of the Alien movies or just the early ones?
You know, I just have to Google stuff like everybody else. I'm terrible with this
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know the real facts, so I don't know. He invented the world. I know that much, but that I don't know the rest of it. I'll have to Google it. Al, you'll have to come Google for me since you're
And what
there.
was the one you said before Aliens? Oh,
The
Linda Hamilton is
Terminators.
Linda Hamilton's from Salisbury.
Oh yeah, I did hear
Yep.
that. That's you're right. You're so right. And I love I was looking at that first one at least, that James Cameron and you had Stan Winston and Stan Winston worked with us on Jurassic Park. So I was like, oh my gosh, all those, you know, tie-ins. And he's amazing. I did get to meet him and go through his studio and see all the movie monsters and all the stuff he has created. And his career is amazing. I mean, that what a neat craft that is. Um, Trying to think if there's any behind the scenes things on anything I can tell you, but no. Does Linda Hamilton ever come home? Do we ever have any? We'll have to get her to Chesapeake Film Festival. We'll have to have this
Yeah.
conversation with locals that are involved with filmmakers.
Now, I did like the most recent of the Terminator movies where she returns,
Okay.
and so does Arnold. They both come back because they were both absent from the 2 or 3 previous to that.
Okay.
Um, and I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. It was one of the better ones of the later few because they've done so many.
Got you.
Um, they had done some kind of CGI Terminator that was supposed to look like Arnold in previous ones, but he actually comes back, and so does she. And how they kind of, yeah, that whole story is pretty cool.
I'll have to
Um,
watch that one then. Do you have
Dark,
a favorite, like a Batman or any of those kind?
I actually, I'm kind of a lukewarm Batman fan. But I will say this: I was very pleasantly surprised with the most recent with Robert
Mhm.
Pattinson playing Batman.
Mhm.
I was I really liked it a lot,
Okay.
um, and I think for me it was because it was such a not only visually dark movie, but it was very thematic dark movie, and you take that Twilight darkness from kind of sort of Robert
Right.
Pattinson. Because when I first heard he was in it, I'm like, because he's so symbolic with Twilight, just
Right. Yeah.
um, but he actually it works, and I was very pleasantly surprised. And to have Colin Farrell play the Penguin, and you don't even visually, you have no idea unless you know by reading,
Mhm.
the credits, you don't even know it's him. But he's does a great job. Um, I
That's cool.
really like the most recent one.
I have to
Um,
see it. I have not seen it. I'm such a fan of Batman Returns with the Tim Burton version, Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito. I of course loved Michelle Pfeiffer as the Catwoman. I just thought that was a cool character that I missed actually in some of the other stuff. I liked her version of it. So I have to go see the new one so I can have a opinion for you on that
well,
one.
it's funny. Did you see the Flash movie?
Nope.
Well, they use some multiverse there, and they bring back several of the Batmans, the actors, kind of like
Oh,
they did with Spider Man. How each of the actors they do
yeah.
something.
Okay.
So Michael Keaton shows up.
Ah,
George Clooney shows up.
how
Um,
funny.
Michael Keaton's part is it's not a lead role, but it's not really a cameo. Whereas George Clooney shows up at the very end, very very short, very and those are. I was not really a big fan of that movie, other than those two kind of throwbacks.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
um,
What
yeah,
do you
go
go
ahead.
ahead? I was
Um,
just
I,
what
I
are those things are on your list?
I wrote down Kill Bill Volume Two.
Those are
I
great.
I just really that's a you can't go wrong with that story. In other words,
Yeah.
Uma Thurman's character is just left for dead, shot at the altar, left for
Yeah.
dead. She's
So
buried
good.
in a coffin, so they think she's dead a couple different times.
Yes.
She
Talk
just
about females on the
she,
loose.
she won't die, and then to have it come full circle at the end, and come to find out she's had a daughter all this time.
Yeah.
Um, and David Carradine's the father, and he's the one who's been trying to kill her, and
Yeah.
um, all these old cohorts of hers, one by one, kind of come back and try to kill her, and
Yep.
they
I
don't. And
love that one.
yeah, and Quentin Tarantino, it's I'm kind of hit or miss with him. I did like, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, with the vampires in the with George Clooney's in that one too,
Yeah.
and Selma Hayek. What was that?
It was like
I did like that one.
yeah, that one I didn't like because it was just all that blood in the Mexican bar, right?
Yeah, Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Yep. Um,
I didn't like that one as much. I thought it was like overkill. It was like dead
oh,
something.
from Dusk Till Dawn.
Yes.
Yep, that's
Yes.
what it was. I did like that one.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'm
although
surprised you don't like the horror movies that I'm always trying to throw your way. You know?
I'm not a horror movie person. Um, but I do want to talk about at the end here. I'm going to talk about the most recent M Night Shyamalan's movie that I
Oh,
watched last Friday,
you
and
did.
I liked it. Well, it was slow to start, but I ended up liking it. It's completely different than anything I've ever seen him do. Like completely different. It's not as out there. It's not as kind of abstract, and it's not as it's not as violent. Like um, yeah, it's different. It's a psychological thriller. Josh
What
Hartnett,
do you remember the name of it?
Trap.
Yes, I have to see it. I saw the teaser trailer of it.
Yep.
Okay.
Music is really good because it takes place most of the movie is taking place in a concert. So
Oh,
there's the whole thing,
oh, that's right.
and that's M. Night Shyamalan's daughter who is the singer.
Oh,
Um,
right. Okay.
so he's got a daughter that's a singer, and he's got a daughter that just made her directorial debut with Strangers in a movie. Um,
Yes.
so yeah,
Yes. I saw that actually, I think.
so I had not seen Josh Hartnett playing anything for the longest time, and
Yeah.
it does not fit. It did not fit, or I didn't think it was going to fit as him being the bad guy, but it actually kind of does.
Mhm.
Um, but you have to kind of really give it some time and understand the psychology of the character of what he's doing and the dual life that this character is leading. So Josh Hartnett does fit one side of that, you know, family
Mhm.
man trying to portray the family man, and then there's the dark side, and he keeps these two lives completely separate. So it kind of it that makes it work. The character makes the actor work, if that makes sense to you.
Yes. Yep. Because his dichotomy is what is being taken out, and we get to see both sides.
Yes, because I remember Josh Hartnett from a movie called 40 Days, where it was kind of a young adult, young adult comedy, kind of
Hmm.
kind of light and just kind of lots of innuendos and stuff like that. But I kind of see him or remember him from that role. So for him to pop in and actually do okay, it's
Yeah.
slow at first, but it kind of comes on at the end, and it really kind of talk about a movie that really deserves to have a sequel. This one, I would be shocked if this one did not have a sequel.
That's
Um,
good to hear.
just how they leave it at the end, because, and I think it was perfect because you are aware that he's the bad guy from the get go, but he's not particularly unlikable for the longest time in the movie because he's playing a father
Yeah.
at a concert with his daughter. That's what he's portraying. So
Yeah.
that's how he comes across to the audience. But later on, the dark side comes out. Then you really start to like want him to like get caught, and
Hmm.
so yeah,
That is
that one's
interesting.
got to have a sequel. I'm sure as long as it does well enough to warrant a sequel, it's just got to.
I love that. I mean, that's the thing. So, in my job back in the day, people would pitch me ideas, and you'd have to think it through and go, well, do I like this enough to take it up the chain and pitch it forward? And so, when someone's pitching a sequel, what are some of those themes that you think make it really work? I mean, is it like overcoming challenges, the characters? Is it a character arc that's happening? Is it superpowers that just we all want to be a hero in our lives? So there's that fantasy kind of like inspiration. Is it, I don't know, what do you think sort of an overarching requirement to have a storyline that repeats?
Yeah. So I think there's two for me, and they're actually at opposite ends of the spectrum. There's either like with the Avengers, where Thanos was he was the bad guy, he was the ultimate villain, and we wanted so badly as the audience to have him be defeated. Um, so when we don't get that satisfaction, and we're like, I want to tune in the next time to watch them take out Thanos. There's that part of it, and then there's
Mhm.
also on the other end where there's such a crescendo of a feel good story that kind of sort of climaxes at the end where we're just like, oh yes, but it's such a feel good thing that we want to see that continue. We want to see that carry over. We want to see maybe if it's a romantic comedy or there was a love involved where they maybe get together at the very end, like the very last scene is them getting together. We're like, okay, that's great, but now what? We want to
Yeah.
see them. Do we want to see them get married and have kids, or if it's if the climax of the movie is in the last 5 or 10 minutes, that's great because it's taking us on that ride to get us there. But then you're like, okay, it's we've got just 5 or 10 minute look at that, so we want to have
Yeah,
another hour and a half of that.
it's so
So
true.
there's two parts to that for me.
I was thinking about that too with the romantic movies.
Yeah,
How, some of them I think are successful because it's all about the chase and then finally getting the girl in the end or finally
yeah,
getting the partner in the end. And then you almost don't, how would you almost want to just sit with that? You just want to have
yeah,
that reward for so long. You don't want, like with Pretty Woman, I was thinking, would that ever make a sequel? Nobody wants to see Richard Gere and Julia Roberts grow into having kids together and making orange juice and like eggs in the morning and becoming mundane. Like you don't even want to see it. You're just like so excited about it being this wonderful, romance.
yeah.
There's
Her
certain
her
movies.
yeah, her story arc was so, going from a prostitute to where she falling in love with like the rich,
Hmm.
charming, handsome guy. Like that's a huge leap. It's
Right.
almost like there's nowhere else really for it to go. It's
Right.
such a gigantic jump from the beginning to the end. Yeah,
Hmm. Exactly. And you just don't want to ruin it. And a lot
yeah,
of those romantic comedies end there really, where they just go off into the sunset, but they don't turn into like National Lampoon's Vacation Family right away. Thank God. You
right.
get to sit with them as like that young cute couple for a while. And so, but I was thinking of another thing that makes sequels work is, say, in the American Pie movies. I'm always pushing
Hmm.
my brother's movies. They'll have a certain character, like the woman who does the band camp. So you get the first one, and like one joke goes over so well that an
Yep,
entire sequel can be based on that one thing,
yep.
and it's just perfect. And that doesn't happen all the time, but it's just gold when it does. A whole world can spawn from it.
And Chris said that wasn't even the intention. It just was kind of a throw out line that just kind of landed. Yeah,
Exactly. That's when they're so smart to have noticed it, believed it, and let it go and let it
yeah.
happen. It's good.
But I've also got, and these are both big franchises. But I tell you, I'm a big James Bond fan. We've talked
Mm,
about the James Bond
hmm.
series movies,
Love them.
especially when Daniel Craig came on and did the five that he did.
Okay.
I thought that they progressively got better and better and better, and I'm not sure. I think there's a couple reasons for that as a viewer. Number one, it was not intended to be to hook on to previous James Bond stories and pick up from there. It was
Mhm.
supposed to be a completely different James Bond, and they kind of make fun of it in that he does not want his drink shaken, not stirred. He's like, who would do that? Like they make a point to say this is not the James Bond that you're used to seeing,
Gotcha.
but they really get behind the scenes of why James Bond is the way he is. The womanizing loner that we all know that James Bond character to be. They
Interesting.
really dive deep into what he has gone through from his past and how he like really how he becomes a secret agent and they really develop that relationship with him and um, oh, what's her name? Judy Dench plays
Oh yeah.
um, the one of the lead characters, and how they're they're very like they butt heads all the time, but there's a love and a respect there that's very deep between the two of
Mhm.
them. They really build off that, and then lo and behold, James Bond, for the first time that we've ever seen, falls in love, not once, but twice in those
Mm.
five movies, and um, yeah, and I don't want to if you haven't seen it, I don't want to give too much
Okay.
away, but
Yeah.
the last one is called No Time to Die. Fantastic. Billie Eilish won an Academy Award for the theme song.
Yes, that's right. I gotta watch
Um,
that tonight.
and there's actually been two songs from the James Bond series that have won Oscars, and the other one was Adele.
Yes.
Skyfall
I love
also
that.
won the Oscar. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's so funny. I'll hear songs now, Liza, that are not involved with the James Bond movie series at all, but I hear them and I think, oh, that would just fit so perfectly as the entrance music to James Bond or the theme song to James Bond.
Nice.
because they're so theatrical and just so
Hmm.
um, that
It's
whole thing.
cool.
But yeah,
I
I'm
love that.
really, I'm really like looking forward to see who's going to be playing the next James Bond. There's so many rumors, and Idris Elba was thrown out there for a while, and
Yep.
then they said, well, does James Bond have to be a man? Can it be a woman? And so there's all that. That'll be
Yeah.
really interesting to see because they those movies have done so well for since the '60s.
Yes, they
Um,
always deliver. We recently at the community center watched Goldfinger again, the
yeah,
1964 Goldfinger, and it
yeah,
still holds up. It's just they're just entertaining.
yeah, that's one of the classics. That's yeah, Sean Connery.
Yes.
It's just it's testament to the writing for them to say, okay, we're gonna keep James Bond for the most part, and what how we that character has been successful, but we're gonna give it a little bit of a twist and make it deeper and have go more in
Mhm.
depth. And I tell you, to watch Daniel Craig do that and do such a great job, and then to watch him in the Knives Out movies,
Oh yeah.
and I'm like, wow, he's pretty talented too.
Hmm.
Because if you do an iconic role like James Bond for five
Hmm.
movies worth, and to play a completely different character,
Yeah.
um, but
It's hard
at,
to wash that off of you, right?
at no point was I thinking this is James Bond. He was the character
Hmm.
because like Remy Malek when he played um, he actually plays the bad guy in the most recent James Bond. The whole time I was thinking that's Freddie Mercury because he
Yes.
won an Academy Award for playing Freddie Mercury
Yes.
in Bohemian Rhapsody. So I
Yeah.
see him, and I think because he looks so much like Freddie
Right.
Mercury.
It's a hard one for sure.
But with Daniel Craig in the Knives Out movies, I did not think that he was the character of those movies. Um,
That's and I like that they gave him so much more in depth because I think that really matters for a sequel success or not too. Because the
yeah,
more um, broad touch points that people can have to feel that they are entering the movie through that character, like I might be relating to something about him and you might be relating to something else about him, but all those different people are relating to him for some reason
yeah,
because he has so many reasons because he's more vulnerable or he's telling you more about his story.
yeah. He is. I was just about to use that word vulnerable because he is as James Bond. He is like in the James Bond world. He gets really vulnerable
Yeah.
and just really very flawed. So he's kind of like he's the hero, but he's the really flawed and but you're empathetic. He
Hmm.
does some bad stuff along the way, and a lot of early on before he falls in love the first time, he's still that James Bond hooking up and womanizing character. And then
Hmm.
the flip scripts in Casino Royale, which I think is the second or third, but it all changes there, and he falls in love, and like it's off to the races from there, and every movie gets a little bit better, and they go a
Okay.
little bit more, little deeper, and yeah,
Wow.
it's so good.
You've given me another good list of things to watch again. I love that.
And of course, the whole both the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, those different series, although they're from the same characters and stories.
Hmm.
I thought and they're each three movies. I thought each of them in each series got better.
Yes,
I
I did too.
I loved Return of the King. There were so many. It kind of played along the same lines of Avenger in that it was one storyline, all three. Like they were
Hmm.
heading towards an outcome of some kind, and
Yeah.
it just different trials and tribulations and different turns and twists. But it was the same story all the way through, and
Yeah.
to like to and it's funny. I look back and in Return of the King, we find out that it was the hobbits that were the heroes the whole time. Like
Hmm.
Frodo and the hobbits, they were the heroes. They saved Middle Earth,
Yep.
and the king like recognizes that at the end, and they all bowed to the hobbits in that scene, and that was just yeah, it was so yeah.
It can tell us so much about our world. I mean, really, those kind
Yeah,
of things and the metaphors that they project onto us. If we really think about that, it's
yeah. You had like one character from each of these different race of people that come together for a common goal to
hmm
defeat, you know,
yep,
Sauron and the evil eye, and yeah, it was, and they didn't all get along at all at the beginning,
right.
and you could tell they didn't really want to be there, but as the kind of the danger grew, they kind of knew, okay, we need to come together, or we're not. None of us are going to survive this. And
Yep.
yeah,
That's one of the most important common themes, I think, on all these movies, but that coming together, the group dynamic. I mean, there's such a human craving to belong and inclusion and like that. I think that works in so many of these all of these franchise things are being part of that group and finding the hero in yourself, your own superhero that fits with the goal of the troop. I mean, it's just those I think make the best.
I think, Liza, it's funny. I've been thinking about what I want our next episode to be, and I think Kathy and I are going to do an episode about um, coming together. It's funny that you say that because I've made this discovery in my journey that it's so much easier to do this thing called life together than it is on our own.
Yeah.
And I was fighting that for the longest time. And not only is it important to come together, but as a side note to that, it's important to know that none of us are alone. We
Yeah.
may convince ourselves in our own mind that we're alone, but in no way, shape, or form are we ever alone because there's always someone, even if it's one person out there that gets where you're coming from or understands what you're going through, or and there's probably many, but we're not aware of it because when we're in the middle of the darkness, it's just like, oh, why me? Or I'm the only one.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say anything because everyone else appears to be doing well, and that's just
Yeah.
not the case because none of us have it all figured out, and all
Yeah.
of us either have struggled or are struggling, and so none of us are alone. And for that reason, it's so important for us to come together because there's so much good and so many things we can do. And what got me to think about this was 10 years ago. Do you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge?
Yes.
They've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for ALS research by doing this. It went global. And I'm
hmm
thinking, here are these two guys that just decided to pour a bucket of water on their head. Think about how ridiculous and silly that is. And just kind of say, hey, follow our lead. And, we're trying to raise money for this cause. And for it to raise, I think they said globally, like $300 million over the course of the time. I mean, think
Mm-mm-mm.
about that. And
Yeah.
Kath and I talked about it, and I'm like, what could we do? It doesn't have to be like that kind of thing, but
Right.
the power of people coming together is so impactful and so big, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, just so we're going to dive into that, and the fact that we're none of us are alone, and we need to come together
Yeah.
to make this whole thing because we're all part of this world, and we all are connected. Whether it's just in our communities or in our families or so yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. And the more honest that you are, the more deep your relationships grow with those people around you. The more you let your truth out there, the more someone else will go, "Oh my God, me too," or "Thank you," or "I get you." Just really, you get so much more of a relationship rather than being too scared to talk
yep,
about it
you
or
you, you
honest.
can you connect so much more genuinely and so much more deeply when you
hmm
show people who you really are and what you're really going through.
Yep.
And that was a struggle for me because I was fighting that for 40 years, Liza. And I'm
Yep.
telling you, it is that's the key. The moment you decide to tell your story is the moment you start heading into a better direction for yourself.
That is the
I
key.
firmly believe that.
Yep. I totally agree with you. And I wish everyone the courage that they deserve to have, and just to just start going in that direction.
Yeah. So we're going to end here in a few minutes by we already talked about the movie Trap, which I saw last Friday, and we're going to talk about another one that I think should have a sequel that I just watched on Netflix called um, oh, it's slipping my mind. Oh, Find Me Falling
Yes.
with
Yes.
Harry Connick Jr. It's on Netflix, and it was direct to Netflix. Um, so yes, I really enjoyed that. It's really cool. It's not a new story arc. The story arc is we've seen it before, but it's kind of a dual story arc. The Harry Connick Jr.'s character is kind of he plays a rock star who's kind of fed up or whatever, kind of lost. So he secludes himself from the island of Cyprus, and we don't know at first why, but there's a story behind why he goes to Cyprus. And then he has some surprises along the way that really broaden the story arc. And
Yeah.
he not only does he discover those things, but he taps into a side of himself, um, yeah, without giving too much away, that he didn't know was in there. And by the end, he's a different character, which I love, a redemptive story arc for a character. Um, I would like to see that one continue. So I really enjoyed that one.
I agree. I did actually see that for once. I haven't seen a lot of new movies, and that one I enjoyed so much. Same thing, like the longing for true relationships and community.
Yeah,
And you don't need to have, a million people around to have that, as long as it's a true community and you can be yourself.
awesome.
Hmm.
All right, we're going to say goodbye for now. Liza, thank you so much for joining me,
Thank
and
you.
and we'll catch you next time on Easter Short Talk. Take care, guys.
Bye.